Hello guys, Art-Teeves here. This video is the second part of the playlist that covers the process of UV unwrapping the simple stylized submarine. My workflow here is pretty simple and won't work for some models that are more realistic than this submarine of mine. I even left some UVs way too stretched because they weren't really noticeable. The whole model is unwrapped to a single 4K Reso PNG UV map with a padding of 16, primarily for demo purposes. Perhaps it would be a better idea to stick to a padding of 32. Also, I don't use any plugins or scripts, so I eventually send my model to Rizom to straighten some UV chucks, because I really do enjoy its straightening algorithm. The model UVs are currently non-overlapping. My optimization strategy would involve re-unwrapping it to use shared UV islands for symmetrical elements like the legs and portholes. My recording software lagged when I was unwrapping a ton of elements, so some parts of the video are missing. Nothing too exciting, just splitting cylinder seams and aligning things. The previous video demonstrated a method for separating the model along hard edges. Since the low poly model is already split and assigned to a single smoothing group, UV seams are the only remaining requirement. These seams can be placed in either inconspicuous locations for visual concealment or easily accessible areas for convenient texturing. I prefer to stick to the second approach. Smoothing data will be transferred from the high poly model during baking. To facilitate this, the low poly model was split along hard edges, duplicated, and high poly versions were created from the resulting elements. While I chose not to sculpt the high poly model for this project, the workflow is structured to accommodate and facilitate sculpting. At any stage, the high poly model could have been sent to Blender or ZBrush for sculpting. The resulting details would then be baked onto the low poly model currently being unwrapped. After placing all UV seams, I simply relax elements and position them horizontally or vertically depending on their location. Eventually they go to Rizom, where I use its Optimize tool and also its Straighten tool. Most seams are positioned on hard edges. Essentially, a hard edge is where the surface of the model changes direction abruptly, creating a visually distinct line or corner. They contrast with soft edges, where the transition is smooth and gradual, like the curve of the ball. The submarine hull, among other objects, was split along its central axis of symmetry. In retrospect, positioning the seam on the bottom, a less frequently viewed area, could have been a more strategic choice. I'll speed up this section of the video, for everything I do here seems obvious and repetitive to me. You can always slow the video down if you so desire. An alternative approach, avoiding the initial single smoothing group, would have allowed us to use the existing smoothing groups to create UV splits along hard edges. After all UV seams are assigned, I simply relax and normalize the UV chucks I get. Straightening some straight or almost straight chucks in 3ds Max is never a great idea unless you have some dedicated plugins. You can always do it in Blender, Maya or Rizom. We will need to increase the UV island size for certain details, such as the rear periscope lens. I prefer to do it after all other adjustments are complete, but before UV packing. For applying stickers, paintings, or text elements, we'll need to increase the size of corresponding UV islands. I don't use any of that in the current project. When adjusting UV island sizes, maintain relative proportions within the same object. For example, leg UVs should be scaled relative to other leg segments. It's generally good practice to keep UV size variations within 20% of neighboring elements. All UV islands belonging to a single element must be scaled proportionally to avoid visible seams. Before you send your model to different software, remember to reset its rotation angles, pivot points, scale, and X-form. What I like about Rizom is the fact it highlights some flipped UVs and also has a great way of showing stretched UVs. Finally, I resize some UV chucks I want to resize and repack the model in Rizom. Then I return to 3ds Max and use its X-View tool to scan my model for some flipped or overlapped UV chucks. And that covers everything I wanted to mention. I'll stop narrating at this point. Thanks for watching, guys. If my videos are of use to you, be my guest and subscribe to my channel for more stylized content. And most importantly, have a great day!